The chief of the Ahl Sunnat and the founder of fiqh is Imam Azam Abu Hanife rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. 3/4 of the rules of Islam that are being practiced all over the world belong to him. He has a share also in the remaining 1/4. He is the host, the chief of the family in the Islamic religion. All other mujtahids are his children. All the rules which a mujtahid has derived are called a madhhab. As of today, out of hundreds of Ahl Sunnat madhabs, only 4 Imams madhabs have been transferred into books, and the others have been partly forgotten. The names and the Hijri dates of the deaths of the 4 Imams are Abu Hanifa, he passed away in 150 Hijri. Malik bin Anas Asbahi, he passed away in 179 Hijri. Muhammad Shafi passed away in 204 Hijri. And Ahmed bin Hanbal, he passed away in 241 Hijri. Non-mujtahids have to follow one of these 4 madhabs in all their practices and acts of worship. This means to say that our Prophet's sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his way is the way shown by the Quran and the Hadiths, i.e. by the 2 sources called the Sunnat, and by the ijtihad of the mujtahids. Besides these 3 documents, there is the Ijma-i Ummat, which is, as is written under the subject of imprisonment in Ibn Abidin, the words of the Ashab Kiram, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, and those of the Tabi'in. Tabi'in are the generation that followed the Ashab Kiram. So that is, they are the things which none of them rejected or denied upon seeing them. The Shiites claim in the book Minhaj as-Salihin is not correct. They say that it is not permissible to adapt ourselves to a dead person. That's incorrect. Islamic religion has reached us through these 4 sources. These 4 sources are called Adilla-i Sharia. Everything outside these sources are bid'ats, irreligiousness, and falsities. The inspirations and the kashfs that occur to the hearts of the great men of tasawwuf cannot be proofs or documents for the rules of the ahkam-i Islamiyah. Correctness of the kashfs and inspirations is judged by their compatibility with the ahkam-i Islamiyah. A wali who has attained a high grade in tasawwuf or wilayat has to follow a mujtahid, like Muslims in lower grades. The awliya, such as Bistami, Junayd, Jalaluddin Rumi, and Muhyiddin Arabi, were raised in rank by adapting themselves to a madhhab, as everybody else did. Adhering to the rules of the ahkam-i Islamiyah is like planting a tree. The knowledge, the marifat, the kashfs, the tajallis, the divine love, and the muhabbat-i dhatiyah that occur to the awliya are like the fruits of this tree. Yes, the purpose in planting the tree is to get fruit, but it is necessary first to plant the tree for obtaining the fruit. That is, unless there is iman and the rules of the ahkam-i Islamiyah, and unless these are performed, there can be no tasawwuf, tariqat, or awliya. Those who claim that this is so are zindiqs and irreligious people. A note here, a person who saw the Prophet at least once when the Prophet was alive is called a sahabi. It goes without saying that a disbeliever could not be a sahabi or an ashab. So ashab means a Muslim who saw or heard the Prophet at least once. All of the ashab are called ashab-i kiram. When we say ashab-i kiram, we mean all the Muslims who were with him, spoke to him, listened to him, or at least saw him. If a person did not see the Prophet, but if he saw one of the ashab-i kiram, he is called a tabi. The plural of tabi is tabi'in. When we say the tabi'in, we mean all the Muslims, each of whom saw at least one sahabi, at least once. A person who saw one of the tabi'in is called taba'i tabi'in. When we say salaf salihin, we mean the ashab-i kiram, the tabi'in, and the taba'i tabi'in. That's what salaf salihin means. And also to love for only Allah without including His attributes. This is referring to muhabbat-i dhatiyah. That is love for only Allah Ta'ala without including His attributes. So divine love is love for Allah together with His attributes. Finally, the third part is zindiqs, a person who endeavors to defend and spread his own thoughts under the name of Islam, though they are in fact incompatible with Islam. That is a person called a zindiq. So we should be aware and beware from such people more than we would do from a vicious lion. A lion will only take away our life, but such people will take away our faith and iman and our next life. It is written in the book Maraj-i-Bahrain, which quotes Ahmad Zarruq as saying that Imam Malik rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi said, anybody who dives into tasawwuf without learning fiqh becomes a zindiq, and anybody who learns fiqh and yet is not aware of tasawwuf goes astray. But those who obtain knowledge of both fiqh and tasawwuf attain the truth. Anybody who learns fiqh correctly and who tastes the sweetness of tasawwuf becomes a perfect kamil. All the early men of tasawwuf were in the madhhab of a scholar of fiqh before they attained perfection. The statement, people of tasawwuf don't have a madhhab, does not mean that they left their madhabs, but rather it means that they knew all the madhabs and that they always observed the rules of all of them. So in a way it was a fifth way. So they knew all the rules of Hanafi, Shafi, Maliki, Hanbali, and they followed the azamats, the difficulties in each of these madhabs to make sure that all their actions were compatible to all four of them. So that was their fifth way. That's the people of tasawwuf. They performed their duties in accordance with what was best and what was on the safe side. Junayd-i-Baghdadi was in the madhab of Sufyan-i-Sahri. Abdul Qadir Gailani was Hanbali. Abu Bakr Shibli was Maliki. Imam Rabbani and Jariri were in the madhab of Hanafi. Haris-i-Muhassibi was a Shafi. Qaddasallahu ta'ala asrarahum. Sayyid Abdul Hakim Arwasi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, says in his book Sahaba. And by the way, Sayyid Abdul Hakim Arwasi, rahmatullahi alayh, was a great and profound religious savant. His name was mentioned in the preface of our book. His letter to a university student radiates knowledge. It was translated into English and published as a brochure. The current book includes that letter. He passed away in 1362 Hijri, or 1943 of the Christian era. The English version of the book, entitled Sahaba, is available from the Hakikat Kitabevi in Istanbul, Turkey. So he writes in his book Sahaba, Ijtihad means to work with all of one's might, to strive and to take pains. In other words, it is to strive to derive the rules, to solve problems that have not been explained clearly and openly in the Quran or in the Hadiths, by likening them to matters that have been explained clearly and in detail. And this action could be done only by our Prophet ﷺ, by all his ashab, and of all the other Muslims, by those who have been promoted to the grade of ijtihad. These exalted people are called mujtahids. Allah Ta'ala commands us to perform ijtihad at many places of the Quran. Then it is fard for mutlaq mujtahids to perform ijtihad. They are great people who can understand the rules of the ahkam-i-islamiyya and religious matters lying in the depths of the ayats and hadiths that do not have clearly understandable meanings. They do this by using their understanding of the text and the meaning that can be inferred from the text. Being a mujtahid requires knowing the high branches of Arabic thoroughly, knowing the Quran by heart, knowing what each ayat means, the meanings that it indicates, the meanings lying hidden in it, the meanings that must be given in according to the subject, knowing when the ayats descended, why they descended, about what they descended, if they are general or particular, if they are nasikh or mansukh, which means, some ayats were changed by some other ayats later that descended, and the former ayats that were changed are called mansukh, which means changed. The latter are called nasikh, which means the ones that have changed the former. So the ayat about wine is a perfect example. So also, if the ayats are conditioned or unconditional, so what that's referring to is that some ayats depend on some conditions. For example, the ayat that reads, O believers, perform namaz, perform salat, is conditioned because to perform namaz, one has to be sane, in puberty, after pubert, and has to have a ritual ablution. But the ayat that reads, O people have Iman, is unconditional because everybody has to have Iman. So how the ayats have been derived from the Qirati Sabah and the Qirati Shaza. So Qirati Sabah, Qirati Shaza. So some ayats in the Quran are read in 7 different ways. Sabah means 7. Each reading has a different meaning. Qirati Shaza, it means the word which a few of the Prophet's companions used to recite in an unusual manner. We've discussed that earlier. So to know how they've been derived from these two, Sabah and Shaza. Knowing by heart the hundreds of thousands of hadiths that are in the Kutub-i-Sittah. Kutub-i-Sittah is the 6 books, hadith books, which all Islamic savants have confirmed to be correct. So they have to know all of the hadiths, the hundreds of thousands, by heart. And also in other hadith books outside of Kutub-i-Sittah. Knowing when and why each hadith was said and how comprehensive its meaning is. Which hadith is before or after the other. The events that have to do with it, with each hadith, and upon what events and happenings it was said, by whom they were communicated or narrated to, and the state of the morality of the persons who communicated it, knowing the methods and rules of the science of fiqh, comprehending the 12 branches of knowledge, and the indications and symbols of the Quran and hadiths, and their clear and hidden meanings, and having these meanings fixed in the heart, having a strong iman and a bright, pure heart, and a conscience possessing superior qualities and serenity. Okay, this is the quality of a mujtahid, mutlaq. The book entitled Rad-i-Wahhabi, which was written in Persian by Mufti Muhammad Sahib, an Indian scholar, contains detailed information about ijtihad and tafsir. The book entitled Rad-i-Wahhabi was printed in Delhi in 1264 Hijri and in Istanbul in 1415 Hijri. All these superior qualities could exist only in the Ashab-i Kiram and later in some of the great awliya who lived within the earliest 200 years of the period after them. Later, opinions and predispositions branched out and bid'ats started to appear and spread. In process of time, such auspicious people decreased in number, and by 400 Hijri, there was no one left in the world to satisfy all these conditions. That is, who was a mutlaq or absolute mujtahid. So by the end of the 4th century after the Hijrat, or the Hijri, there was no longer any need for a mujtahid in that capacity. Because Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger Muhammad alayhi salam had already disclosed all the rules to comprehend the entirety of the changes and innovations in lifestyles and scientific means to be effected till doomsday. And mujtahids in their turn studied them, understood them well, and explained them. How these rules are to be applied to newly arising situations and events is written in books of tafsir and fiqh by the scholars succeeding those great mujtahids. These scholars, who are called mujaddids, exist today, and they will exist till doomsday. So it must be determined, therefore, that people who advocate the amendments and changes must be added to, that they say must be added to Ayat Karimas and Hadith Sharifs, i.e. to the Nas, and who strive to distract Muslims with fallacies such as there have been improvements in scientific means so that we have been confronted with new events. Men of religion should come together, write new tafsirs, and cooperate in the accomplishment of new ijtihads. These kinds of people are enemies of Islam. They're zandiqs. The most baleful enemies of Islam are of British origin. The United Kingdom, based on a bedrock made up of cruelty, oppression, trickery, and treachery, invaded 40 countries in Canada, in Australia, in Asia, and in Africa by way of cultural imperialism and brutal force, and subdued them into being British colonies. What they did first, as a requirement of the abhorrent British policy, was to exterminate the languages, the religions, and customs and cultures of those countries. The next step was to tap and exploit their subterranean and above-ground resources. All attempts of resistance were suppressed in a bloody manner. All madrasas and schools teaching the Islamic religion were closed. All scholars and men of religion who could show the right way to the people, including students, were put to death. It is written in the daily Turkish newspaper entitled Turkiye and dated March 18, 2000, Christian era. that during the Chanakala War, 274,000 Muslims were martyred by the British. Books teaching the Islamic religion were destroyed so that the new generations should be raised as irreligious people. As the British annexed India during the Ottoman-Russian War in 1877, they had already guaranteed the support of Midhat Pasha. For Midhat Pasha, on account of his being a registered member of the notorious Scottish Masonic Lodge, had been used as a British agent by the British government, had dragged the Ottoman state into the war, and had had Sultan Abdulaziz, the 32nd Ottoman Padishah, and also the 97th Islamic Khalifa, martyred, killed. Owing to the slanderous casuistry that a man of religion will not need scientific knowledge, which had been concocted by the spies being employed in the name of Western experts in cooperation with the westerly-orientated Ottoman statesmen, scientific programs were expunged from the madrasa curriculums. Thereafter, the men of religion who had thereby been deprived of scientific knowledge were blamed as ignoramuses who were unaware of science, which in turn was exploited as a stratagem for the estrangement of younger generations from Islam.